There is a black paper. I'm sure you are wondering why it is termed black. But then we have the experts here to give us more details about this research that they have conducted. So why the black paper?
So it's being called a black paper as opposed to the typical white paper because, as we've said, we are exerting ourselves as Africans. And so why call it a black paper when we are trying to, come out as Africans and own our continent and try to assert ourselves?
Okay.
That's why it's called a black paper.
Right. So what is the content?
So the content of the paper is under a broad campaign that is called Stop the Bleeding. And as you can tell from the name, we're talking about how funds leave the continent, funds that we so desperately need, leave the continent through various means, illegal means, through the illicit financial flows, and also Africa as the net creditor to the rest of the world. And so that paper is talking about things that we need to consider. What are the things that are in our economic structure that is causing these, this bleeding, right? And then some proposed solutions on issues and places that we need to look at as a continent, at the global level and then at the national level to stop the bleeding, as it were.
Okay. So, Doc, illicit financial flow. We've been talking about this since under invoicing, transfer, price transfer, amongst others. What are the loopholes once again, and how can we seal it for the monies that we are looking for remain on the continent?
I think since we are discussing reparations, we discuss it within the context of that. So just like we said a few minutes ago in the earlier interview, there are structural issues that have caused our systems to be very porous and weak, which is leading to these illicit financial flows, leakages, as some researchers decide to call it. So once the global financial architecture is structured in a way that doesn't favor Africa, secondly, once the colonial era has created some economic and social political structures that influence corruption and other things, our systems that we put in place are not strong enough to check against corruption, embezzlement, bribery, and all these things to stop the leakages from flowing through our system. So these are some of the things that our paper seeks to highlight. And once we are able to check these things, we need to have a conversation, which this one is very important. This conference tries to highlight what works for Africa, what political systems work for Africa. Once we have that conversation, because what was put in place by the colonial masters is not fit for purpose in this current dispensation. So we need to have that conversation, come up with what works, the best system, political and cultural systems that work for Africa, and then we figure out how this system that is fit for purpose in this particular dispensation for Africa is best at sealing or blocking the leakages. That is the only way we can stop some of these illicit financial flows. Africa loses currently about $80 billion annually to illicit financial flows, which, if sealed, this is money that can take care of education, healthcare spending, and help Africa's effort to meet global goals of 2030.
Okay, so let me move straight to the gentleman here. What are some of the recommendations that your paper highlighted?
Right, so first of all, for Africa to stop the bleeding, we have to take charge of the narrative. That's the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we also have to have or hold on to our bargaining chip. At the moment, when we go to the table of negotiation, we allow the colonialists or the people that are causing the bleeding to basically dictate to us what to do. We have to go with a strong arm. And the strong arm would come from not the political elite, but from the common people. Because you see, in Africa, the politicians have their own interest, and the people have their own interest. What we want is for the people's interest to be upheld. Now, for that to happen, we need to have a scenario where, as part of the advocacy, right, we bring the people along. If you make the people make the demands, the politicians want to stay in power. So if you tie these interests to the politicians' interest to stay in power, what would happen is that you get the job done, right? So for us to get the job done, we have to, as part of our advocacy, try to influence the electorate, right? I mean, if you want to stop illicit flow of capital, do the people understand what is happening? If they want it and they make it an electoral issue, then we can get the politicians to do something about it. So these are some of the things that our paper tries to highlight, which we propose workable and implementable steps that the continent can follow in order to achieve, to stop the bleeding. Thank you.
So educate our viewers about climate financing.
Okay, thank you very much. So when we are talking about climate finance, we have to link it to the broad framework of what we are talking about here, because I think Dr. Mekpo here mentioned about how the global financial architecture is designed not to favor Africa. And the climate finance structure is not different. So what happens there is the same thing that happens there. In climate finance basically are the funds that are dispersed or meant to help deal with the climate change, the effects of climate change. So meant to support adaptation and mitigation. And when we talk about adaptation, we are talking about how to cope with the effects of climate change. And the mitigation has to deal more with preventing the climate crisis. So that has to do more with reducing carbon emissions and investing more in renewable energy and those type of things. So that's what climate finance does, brings funds to help cater for adaptation and then mitigation. So what we are talking about here in this paper with regards to climate finance is that mainly two issues. Most of the climate finance that flows into Africa comes in the form of loans. And you know, in this conference we are talking about debt. And many African countries are already crippled by severe debts at high interest rates. So once the finance, which is most needed by Africa, because interestingly, Africa is the least contributor to carbon emissions, less than 4%, but we suffer the burden. So we suffer disproportionately the effects of the climate crisis. So we need most those funds to deal with the effects of climate change. But at the same time, when the funds are coming in, they are coming in as debt. Again, when these funds are coming in, they are coming from externally, of course, the global north, and as my friends have referenced here, the colonizers, and they design these mechanisms. And sometimes, and most of the time, they don't match their domestic priorities or what the country, these African countries need in terms of climate. So the challenge is twofold. If we are going to benefit from climate finance, then we have to assert ourselves on the global stage. How do we do that? By presenting a strong front. And a way to do that is to unite as Africans. I think we, as a region, we have a significantly large number of countries. And if all the African countries are united in pushing for an agenda, I think there is some success that can come out of that. And then in the second place, we have to deal with our own leakages internally at the domestic level and the national level. If the money is coming in and is going to flow out, then what's the point of going in there to get the money? And then also the African agency, how do we do things to help ourselves? If our continent is already designed to work against us, then we need to work. We can't continue to depend on the money that will come from there while we are working for them to pay for what they have done. At the same time, we also have to exert ourselves, because all our hope cannot be on getting people to pay for things that they've done.
All right, so due to time, what's your final word?
Well, so my final word would be that the Stop the Bleeding campaign is not a campaign for a few. It's a campaign for all Africans. So all Africans and all those who wish Africa well should come on board and support the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you too, Doc.
Africa can do this. We just need to come together. We have the strength, we have the natural resources, we have the human resources to pull this off. We just have to present a united front and attack this issue of reparation and reparative justice with a lot of strength. And I'm sure once we show strength at a global stage, the world will be ready to listen to us.
Okay.